Welcome to Justin A.W. Blair's channel. I'm a writer, I'm a painter, bit of a dilettante in the painting sphere. But I'm a writer. I write fantasy, I write science fiction, all kinds of fiction. Today we're going to talk about Deep Space Nine, Emissary, the novel. Not the episode, the novel. Did you know? They wrote novels. All kinds of Star Trek. I'm sure if you've clicked on here, you're most likely familiar with this fact. Back in the 80s and the 90s, novels having to do with Star Trek were relatively popular, I think. I don't know. I was a nerdy child and read a lot of Star Trek novels. Maybe they were never that popular. I think they were certainly more popular than they are today. But we're gonna talk about Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Emissary. I got the little pocketbook. I think Pocketbook was the only one that published it. Tiny little mass market sized paperbacks, very short, quick read, kind of enjoyable. We're going to talk about, in general, Pocketbook Star Trek and the specifics of Deep Space Nine Emissary. So a little bit of background briefly on this. I'm going to actually read several of these novels. They read so quickly and they're kind of fun. I think I'm going to read several of these novels. I'm not entirely sure yet. This first one was passable. I'm already working on the second one now called The Siege. And that novel differs from this in that it is not a scene-for-scene novelization of an episode of Deep Space Nine. The second book, The Siege, is actually an original idea, an original concept based and set in the Deep Space Nine world using the characters. I'm a little ways into it right now. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a tad spotty. All of these novels were written relatively quickly. These are not exactly great works of art. I don't think they necessarily even reach the heights that some of the episodes of the television series did. But we'll see. Let's get back to Emissary, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, the novel. So this came out in 1993, and J.M. Dillard was the author. So for me, it's been about 6 months since I watched Deep Space Nine. And prior to that, it had been, since the 90s. So one thing that's interesting about this for fans of Star Trek Deep Space Nine is to read, compare, what is enriched, what is expanded on, what's different in the novel than from the episodes. We get the beginning of this, Sisko's on the Saratoga, which is the ship that is going to be destroyed by the Borg. And, it's made mention that his captain is a Vulcan. Sorel, I think is his name. I didn't really catch that in the episode Emissary. So that was fun for me to learn about. We get a little bit about the captain, what happens to him later. It's not a good ending for him. It brings up an issue broader with Deep Space Nine that I thought was interesting, which is that so much of the beginning, this first episode of Deep Space Nine, is about Sisko's backstory. And obviously the importance of the event of him losing his wife to the attack from the Borg. But it's interesting to me that in Deep Space Nine, you really don't hear about or see the Borg much at all after this. Now, I think that was actually wise, an extremely wise move, because the Next Generation had, really pushed the Borg thing to the story to its limit with the actual series and then also the movies to some degree. So I'm happy that the Borg don't figure into Deep Space Nine, but the specifics of the incident are played out through this novel of Sisko trying to rescue his wife and son. He obviously does rescue his son, Jake. Some of us aren't real happy about that, given the acting capabilities of Jake on Deep Space Nine, but he is rescued. Something came up for me in this novel that I didn't remember, and you're going to have to leave in the comments if you know this answer. I don't. Is Sisko's wife actually dead when he's trying to rescue her, or is she still alive and simply buried under the rubble of the spaceship? That's a pretty dark twist there if she's still alive. I don't think she is. I think they make it clear that she's already dead and he's still trying to free her from the wreckage, but I'm not really sure. Leave it in the comments if you know. On the note of these being books that are written fairly quickly, there's not a lot of errors, not a lot of errata, as we like to say in the writing business. There was one on page 7 where it speaks about, I can read it for you here, give you a little bit of the tone of the book also, I think you'll understand. Sisko watched the screen as the Gauge and the Kyushu opened fire in the Borg vessel, trying in vain to save the Saratoga, just as Saratoga had done for the Melbourne. And the outcome would be the same, Sisko realized with terrible cold certainty. Yet he permitted himself to feel nothing, only to concentrate on the task at hand as Delaney tersely reported, "Our shields are being drained, 64%, 42. "Recalibrate shield notation," Storl ordered patiently, as if they were not seconds away from death. Beep. Beep. Technical out. There's something called technobabble in Star Trek. A lot of technobabble, though, I think has an internal logic to it. I think this was just a misprint, because it seemed like they were trying to say order shield, a rotation of the shield frequency or whatever, which I remember from The Next Generation was a tactic that would often be used against the Borg. But shield notation is just an error. Now, luckily for this book, the proofreaders caught a lot of those errors. They're common in books. So, not a huge complaint, but again, very quickly written books. On that note, I think Dillard said, I think it's a she didn't have access to much material at all because they were keeping, this was written in 1993 to kind of come out with the, alongside the episode, and all of the information around what the character is going to be like, all this kind of stuff, the scripts themselves were very tightly kept secret. So for the information that Dillard had on hand, I think they worked from a screenplay. I was looking at Memory Alpha. It says, J.M. Dillard wrote the novelization in 8 weeks, basing on a final draft version of the Emissary script from June 1992. I received only occasional spotty updates, she noted, because of the security involved in the creation of the DS9 TV series. Dillard wasn't able to view the as yet unaired pilot episode while she was adapting it. So there's a few things in here that are a little bit off that might actually explain why they're off, because she may have simply not have had access to the final script. And, it, for enjoyment reasons, it's actually not bad. It's you get a few different things in here. You get an expansion of the rank of O'Brien, like what rank is he? Something we all wonder sometimes. So another thing I noted, and again, please yell at me, leave a comment to explain my ignorance. But in page 21, the author suggests that the architecture of Deep Space Nine is Cardassian. So I know that the Cardassians obviously occupied the space station prior to Starfleet getting there, the Federation, Sisko, but I could have sworn that somewhere it was said that while the Cardassians occupied it previously, the space station itself was built by an alien race that no one knew the origin of. Am I insane? Am I in a holodeck gone mad, gone awry? I don't know. Let me trying to communicate. I'm trying to communicate to you, viewer, dear listener and or viewer. Tell me if I hallucinated that. Am I hallucinating the fact that the Cardassians, obviously they built the monitors, the graphics, all of that inside the actual station, but I thought the architecture itself was from something else, not Cardassian. Could be wrong. Anyway, moving on. A few other things I noted here which was odd and didn't seem to correspond quite with what we get in the final episode. The point of view of Nog, we get Nog, which is Quark's nephew, and he seems to be unfamiliar with Odo, but that doesn't make any sense because Nog isn't new to the station and Odo isn't new to the station. Both these characters have been there during the Cardassians. So it's a little odd why Nog seems to not... It's kind of indicated like Nog doesn't really understand what Odo is or what he does. That's page 40. Page 56, we get a line that says, Odo is breathing or eating, but Odo doesn't eat as far as I know, or doesn't need to. I could have sworn, and again, leave it in the comments, that later this is talked about, Odo trying to enjoy food or whatever, because I don't think he eats. I'm not sure he breathes. Then we get some other interesting things. In the novel, it seems we at page 57, Odo's talking about the Bajorans. He calls them the Bajora. He says something to the effect that they treated him like their own when he arrived. I'm not sure that goes... I don't think that's right, because if I recall, Odo is kind of put on a shelf. No one knows what he is. And his name is like a Cardassian word for like unknown slime or something. And then, yes, a Bajoran scientist does end up finding him, discovering him, and keeps him in a lab pretty much all of his life until he gets out and becomes free. And this is part of several episodes in Deep Space Nine, a kind of mini arc that takes place over a couple of seasons where we see Odo's father, who is a scientist that helped him become humanoid, I guess, or helped him be able to pretend to be humanoid. So this characterization of Odo as being very close to the Bajorans because they took him in didn't make a great deal of sense to me. These are just minor notes. These are for the real hardcore Deep Space Nine heads. Is it that important for somebody that's just going to pick this novel up? No. Let's be honest, unless you're already into Star Trek, you're not going to read a novel about Deep Space Nine from 1993. So anyone listening here is probably interested in the minutia. Another thing about this was, and you see this throughout a few different places, but the currency that they talk about being worthwhile is gold. Page 86, at Quarks they accept gold or hard currency. But again, see, this is where I'm not really sure if the author is even familiar with the Trek universe, because before Deep Space Nine even, correct me if I'm wrong, gold isn't that important anymore. It's not really a store of value. Now, right here, since we're on YouTube, this is where I would cue the commercial, the ad spot for buying gold, but I need you to like and subscribe because I don't have enough subscribers for that. This would be a perfect tie-in. My understanding is a latinum, maybe it's gold pressed latinum, maybe that's what they're referring to, but they definitely don't say that. They literally have sacks of gold as the currency in this book. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Here's a bigger thing, and this brings up something that's interesting. On page 112, we're with Julian Bashir, and we're getting inside his head, and said he was born confident and always a genius. Okay. So now this isn't something that can be... This is the treachery, the trap, the problem of writing a novelization of an episode of a television series that is not concluded. Because this is no fault of the author. Bashir early on is definitely characterized like that. But the book is getting inside the thoughts of Bashir. In later seasons, we realize that Bashir was actually not born a genius. In fact, he was born a little slow. And his parents augmented him genetically to be really smart and fast and a little bit annoying. Which, by the way, those episodes with Bashir and the other augmented people, actually some of my favorite 2 episodes. Skipping ahead to page 239, I thought they did do something really good. They came together with a really good point here, which you get in the series, but is really made more explicit in the book. It actually is what made Emissary a pretty solid starting episode for the series of Deep Space Nine. Sisko has lost his wife, and he can't get over that, and understandably so. And he is reliving that memory. So when he gets into the celestial temple and or wormhole alien abode, they do not see time as linear. It's unclear to me if they see it as circular or if they see it all at once. I don't really understand that, but they don't see time in terms of a linear thing. It's this traumatic incident in Sisko's life, which is on a personal level affecting him. Through that event, though, he's actually able to understand something about the aliens, and the aliens are able to understand something about him because they confront him. They're trying to understand linear time, and they confront him, and they say, well, then why are you here? And on the television series and in the book, when they say here, the surroundings of Sisko is back on the Saratoga where he's there. It's on fire. He's trying to save his wife, and they keep saying, why are you here? And he doesn't quite get that at first either. I thought it was a really well done thing just in terms of storytelling to take this incident, which characterizes Sisko for viewers of the show way back when it debuted, but also tying that in with his ability to communicate with an alien species. I actually thought that was a very brilliant thing, because it's only through his recognition that, in a way, he's not actually experiencing linear time. When he's going back and constantly stuck in the past with this traumatic event of his, is he experiencing linear time? Not really. Emissary, you can pick this up on eBay for, $6 or something used. Fun little read, quick read. Sit down and read it in a couple hours. Even if you're, I'm making little notes here, so probably would have read it faster. I miss the days of pocketbooks. I admit it. I don't think that the Star Trek universe is in a place where they could ever do that again. I know they do still publish some, but my understanding is that's slowed down a great deal. That's my take on Emissary from Deep Space Nine. Again, Justin A.W. Blair, here to talk about fantasy, science fiction, Trek, all things enjoyable. When I'm speaking about Star Trek, I'm going to be having my Trek uniform on. Don't always expect that. I also don't want you to be intimidated by my command colors and my ability to communicate to you, viewer. The real communicator, the real communication is between me and you.